Is there such a thing as fairness?
I think that fairness exists in your mind. So what's fair to me might not be fair to you. So yes, I think it exists, but I think that it's a personal thing. It's a individual thing. Because I think that everything that we look at, and every person that we look at, and all the actions that we see are colored by our own preconceived notions.
Okay. Last question is, we talk a lot about love and loving yourself. And my question is what does it mean to love yourself?
I think to love yourself is to be happy in your own skin. And if you love yourself, you are then capable of loving others.
So, if you were to walk down the street, now you see people all the time. And in Hollywood, there are a lot of people who love themselves. But the love that they have is more for their ego, right? It's an ego love. Look at me, look at me. But let's put those people aside. You do see some people who walk down the street, you could tell that they love themselves in the best possible way. What does that look like?
Walking with confidence and sort of carefree and not burdened.
And
wait, you said that was the last question.
Oh, now, Judy, Judy, I didn't expect you to bring your legal team with you. They're right off camera here. I'm just going to do, it's a part B to it. Okay. Can someone, we talked about doubt before, can someone truly love oneself? Can you truly love oneself completely?
Oh, I don't think completely. I think we all have some doubts lurking in our mind.
Okay, that was it. So the legal team seems to be okay with that. Okay, thank you. So here's another part in the Holiness Code they talk about is fairness. I mean, first of all, is there such a thing as fairness?
I think that is a judgment for the person that's being treated, however they're being treated, whether they think it's fair or not.
So would it be... Is it possible to think that maybe fairness is an illusion, or no?
It's somewhat of an illusion because it's almost like beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Right,
yeah.
Right. So to dovetail on that then, so is it possible to ever really judge someone completely fairly?
No.
And I wonder, as we get into the last question, because sometimes judging fairly means also judging ourselves fairly. And in the Holiness Code, it talks about love. And what does it mean to love yourself?
Wow. Loving yourself, I think, is really difficult because you tend to be very critical of yourself. I think most people tend to be very critical of themselves rather than love themselves. So you'd have to get rid of looking at the negative parts of yourself and try to look at the positive parts, which is very hard to do.
Yes, and to push in there on that a little bit, how does doubt play in that whole thing of loving yourself?
Well, even when you're thinking of the positive parts of yourself, I think you tend to doubt. I think you just naturally tend to doubt that and go back to the negative. And I don't know why we do that to ourselves, but we do.
Mm-hmm. And, you've done theater, lots of things, and you've seen that on stage or off stage even more so. The people who love themselves, they love themselves more out of ego, right? Look at me. But you walk down the street, I'm sure, and have seen people who you could just tell they love themselves. Not in the ego sense. What would that look like when you see the street? What does that look like to you when you see someone who goes, yeah, they love themselves?
That honestly love.
Yes.
I think that would be peace, that you really have a peace with the world and with yourself.
And lastly, goes into, kind of dovetails back to the fairness question. Is it possible to really fully love oneself?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. It would be difficult.
What does it mean to love yourself?
Learn about yourself. You learn how to respect yourself for what you go through. And I've gone through a lot, Howard, and I think that I've learned a lot about myself, and I'm treating people differently than I ever did in my life.
Sometimes when you walk down the street, you see people who truly just love themselves. What does that look like when you see somebody who just loves themselves?
And maybe the reason came from God. The glow that you get, the glow that you show.
Well, on another topic, it really is not reptilian in terms of fear. There's such a thing as, well, is there? Is there such a thing as fairness, or is it an illusion? Can one be fair?
I think it's both. I think there's something that's in our bones that is, well, again, you got to clear away a lot of wreckage and baggage and,
Right.
and emotional, all the stuff that we carry to have a true sense of, what do we say, compassion and justice. That's where
Right.
you find fairness, right at that
Right.
crossroads. So I think it is both a reality. I just think it's in the human DNA that there is a sense of fairness, because sometimes and there's really no other way to explain it, it just doesn't feel right.
Right.
It just doesn't feel
Right.
right. But at the same time, pursuing fairness can sometimes be unrealistic.
Yes. And can anyone really judge fairly, completely fairly? Is that even possible?
Wow. We have many mitzvot, a lot of commandments, a lot of guidance,
Right.
instructions in the Torah of, telling us, hey, remember,
Right.
judge the wealthy and the poor equally.
That's
Don't
right.
favor the poor just because they're poor, and don't have a negative bend on the wealthy just because they're wealthy. They all deserve a fair trial.
Right.
They all deserve to be listened to. And various other kinds of instructions that, in our comings and goings and our dealings, this whole idea of fairness,
No.
which is sometimes described as justice, sometimes described as compassion. And there's really, Yafu will probably correct me, and I'm not even sure if there's a word for fairness in Hebrew, except I think they've taken the word fair. I'm not sure if there's an actual, Zeloba said there, it's not okay.
What does it mean to love yourself? What does that mean, to love yourself?
Well, I've certainly spoken about this a little bit. I've written about it, and I'm not an expert. But I had a great conversation with a colleague the other day, and he was giving me the analogy of the iceberg, how about 10% of it is what we can see, and there's a 90% of the iceberg under the water. And we're mostly concerned about that 10%.
Yes, what we can
right?
see.
What you can see.
Right.
Right? And the way I represent myself, and the 90% is what's really going on.
Right.
Right? And so to love myself, I have to begin with the 10%. Meaning, I need to treat myself in a way that is a loving way. Let's just begin there. So love myself is to treat myself lovingly. And the other 90% that's down
Below.
there, that's only between me and myself and me
Right.
and God, that's a lifetime's journey.
Right.
And
Right.
that's my journey. That's my personal journey. High holy days are a great time. Moral inventory, taking stock.
Right.
Where do I stand? Where do I stand with my friends? And inching, hopefully, back more towards love of self.
Right. But when you go out there and you see someone in life who they truly do love themselves, what does that look like?
Yeah, sometimes I just see people happy,
Yes.
and it's not a moment. I was actually at the hospital for a little procedure a few months ago, and I was in the waiting room by myself, that feeling, and the nurse kind of walks in humming. And then out comes the word as she's bringing in the gurney, live in the dream.
Right.
And it was sung to some kind of melody, and I said, really? She said, oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Isn't that something to hear that?
And I just thought, she's at work.
Right.
She's working in a hospital,
Right.
helping people. Can't be all good. And yet here she is, and she's singing and humming, and I just thought, well, that's a component. I mean, your joy, your happiness, it certainly has to be a part of an expression of love for self.
Can one truly love oneself? Is that possible to completely love oneself, or is that is it possible, or is it unachievable?
I think it's achievable. But again, you got to start all over tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah, you got to start all over. There's no such thing as the touchdown. You
Okay.
can inch down, as long as you're inching down the field in the right direction.
Yes.
That's the most important. Sometimes you probably heard me say, sometimes the best I can do on any given day is not to destruct, not to destroy, not to harm.
Right.
If I can't heal, if I can't move forward, if I can't be constructive and bring joy to myself and you and others, at least let's not make it a bad day. If you're not having a good day, don't make it a bad day for
Right.
somebody else. So, yes, but tomorrow you got to start all over again.
Thank you, Rabbi. Appreciate it.
Thank you.